hardcore Artisan Age H175. And I have to say, this thing is an absolutely incredible instrument. Full disclosure, Heritage did make me this guitar, and they did not charge me for this guitar. In other words, I did not pay for it. I did get to spec everything out. I did get to tell them the colors, the appointments, all that stuff. However, they did not make any prerequisites as far as what I had to say, that they got any sort of approval over it. They didn't make any of those requests. They just said, make an honest review of this instrument. And so you're getting my true opinion on exactly what it is that I'm seeing here. So what are Heritage guitars? Well, Heritage is a company that manufactures guitars in the exact same factory with which the original historic Gibsons were made out of. I don't mean historic in like a model of Gibson. I mean like the actual Gibson guitars that we love, the 1959 Les Paul. Those were all made in that factory, and the Heritage line is all made in that original factory as well. After Gibson relocated to Nashville, the Heritage Company restarted the brand, continued to make guitars under the name Heritage in that same exact factory. And this is a current model edition of what would compete with a Les Paul. And those are my words, not Heritage's words. Typically, when you see an HS 150, you're seeing either two humbuckers or you're seeing two P90s. And I was really interested in getting a Les Paul style guitar that had a humbucker bridge and a P90 neck. Now, I know that this isn't the only time that this has ever shown up. I've seen guys like Joey Landreth do it. And I wanted a Bigsby. I wanted something a little bit different than my traditional Les Paul. I wanted to be able to do some vibrato right on board the guitar. And man, I am just so blown away with what this thing does. As far as gear today, separately from the H150, we're going to be going into my stereo pedal board. We're going to be using a slight amount of effects just from some boost devices, just to push the amps a little harder. I'm going to be using an RC booster, and I'm going to be using a Vertex boost. I'm going to be feeding those into a Princeton reverb from 1966 and a 1957 Tweed Deluxe that is an original chassis, but a new speaker cabinet. Those are both mic'd into an ISO cabinet that is separate in another room. The Princeton is going through an Alessandro speaker, and the Tweed Deluxe is going through a Celestion Gold Alnico speaker. All of the processing sounds, the slight amount of reverb you're hearing from a plugin that I'm pulling up through Logic. Very slight room sound just to give it a little bit of air. I remember when I purchased my Gibson Les Paul in 2015, 2016, it was an R8, and I went to a store and I played literally 20 instruments. I played 20 combination of R7s, R8s, R9s, and R0s. I had them all lined up. I played every single one of them and slowly started whittling down my choices to my favorites of the ones that were available. And I remember feeling like there were so many examples of the Gibsons that were just so poorly made, I couldn't believe that they said custom shop on it. And it took 20 instruments to find really two that were really excellent and one that I just preferred over the other. And I've just not found that to be true of the Heritage. Every time I visit Sweetwater or I visit Chicago Music Exchange or any of the great retailers of Heritage instruments, they are all absolutely ringers. They all sound great. And even recently, my friend Eric Walls, who plays with Usher, I went and saw him over here in Oakland when he was playing with Usher. And he's just like, yeah, pick up that Heritage. And the thing absolutely played amazing. It's like everything about them is great, from the aging to the fit and finish to the fretwork. Every detail of this instrument is just tops. Another thing that I noticed about this is that the weight is actually really excellent. So typically anytime you add a Bigsby, you're asking for trouble in terms of weight because these just add a lot more to whatever's going on. This is 8 pounds, 9 ounces. And I'd say that that's a pretty good weight considering that a good Les Paul weight would be like low eights, which is pretty rare. And if you were to take this Bigsby off, it would probably be in that range. Obviously, the Bigsby, stacks the deck a little bit in the favor of having a little bit more weight. But even with that, it is still an incredibly lightweight Les Paul. And that's kind of the range that I look for, is kind of mid to low 8 pound range. And again, with the Bigsby, it still rings true. Absolutely sounds great. Now, I would say that right off the bat, when I've played this and everything's stock, the pickups are very rootsy to me. The whole guitar kind of sounds like a Neil Young record or a Stones record or a Fleetwood Mac record. It has a vibe to it to me that is still very rock and roll, but has a very organic vibe to it. Absolutely love this P90 pickup, and the bridge is just a great kind of PAF style, just rockin' pickup. It's not too overwound. It balances incredibly well, which is one thing I noticed. So balanced, whether I'm in the neck position, I flip over to the bridge. It's not like I get this huge volume jump or anything like that. You put it in the middle position, I would say this is my favorite. I love kind of blending between these two pickups by way of the volume pots, and I can really get some distinct tones from kind of classic, solid body single cut sounds to a really nice kind of Telecaster-y style sound. Another thing that I think is really interesting about the Heritage guitars, like this is kind of like the highest end that you can get from Heritage. And again, these are not inexpensive guitars. These are about $4,600 if you were to buy it from a dealer. And I would say that if you compare the equivalent in a Gibson model, which is the Murphy Lab, they're almost double the price. In fact, some of them are double the price. Although it does say Gibson on the headstock, and that has some value, of course, in terms of its notoriety and probably resale. If the goal is tone and the goal is great playability, these are going to match or exceed anything that I've seen, even at the level of Murphy Lab, although it says Heritage on the body. The aging is right on par. The quality of the workmanship, I would say, is generally better than a lot of the things that I see on Gibson, because it just seems like things fall through the cracks there. I would say being able to custom order something like this where I can get a P90 and a humbucker, that's not something that I could just go to Gibson and do. Or if there is a way to do that, I have no idea how to do it as a customer. To order a Bigsby as a custom option, like these are just things I don't feel like I could just go to Gibson and order, or get something in Cadillac Green without costing an absolute fortune. And again, if I haven't mentioned it, this color is absolutely insane. I love that it's got this traditional, like, kind of like DuPont, like classic American car color. And then I just have this natural back, beautiful aging on the back. It just looks absolutely insane. The neck feels nice and fast. I'm not getting hung up on any of the finish there. I really love that aspect of it. And then again, fretwork and just playability is all just, 100% there. So let's go to a few things that I don't like about the guitar, or I wish were maybe a little bit different. One thing kind of nitpicky is I wish that the nut was cut a little deeper. I think that they're trying to leave some margin for people to do some level of customization, so that might be why they didn't cut it quite as deep. But there was some tendency for the string to kind of slip out. And so I took this over to my technician, Gary Brower, and he did a little work on the nut just to get it to fit in a little bit better into the nut. Although these look sort of like Grover style tuners, they're Heritage brand, I think that these feel a little cheap to me. I understand that they would want to go with a branded tuner. I think, though, I probably will end up changing these just to straight ahead Grovers just to maintain the look. But the Grovers, I think, feel a little bit better to me. I don't know if I'm making that up, but just something that I kind of felt when I was kind of turning the tuners and then comparing them to some guitars that I have that have Grovers. The other thing is I felt like the switch felt a little bit cheap to me. It seemed like it had a lot of play in it comparatively to other switches of this style that I have on different instruments. And so I might end up changing that switch to something else. Again, it could just be in my mind, or maybe this is just a bad example of a switch that maybe was on the borderline and just felt like it had a little too much play. But that would be one thing that I would change. The last thing is under the control plate, and I'll show you a little bit better image of this. I'll open it up. It seemed like the way that they did the wiring on it, they left a lot of the leg on all the capacitors, and it's sitting up really high. I'm not exactly sure why they did that. Generally, you see the legs pulled through in maybe a little relief on it, but not like what we're seeing here. Just looks like a little odd or unusual, like maybe somebody wasn't exactly sure what they were doing in terms of the job. And the whole wire dressing looks a little unusual to me. But again, I don't know that that's representative of all of them, or if that's how they're being instructed to do it. But I just noticed it was odd. I didn't change it, but I just kind of noticed it looked a little different than what I was expecting for this style of instrument at this price point. Now, those are easy fixes. It's nothing terrible like, having a bad setup or anything like that, or having bad or sharp frets, or having the guitar that doesn't intonate properly. On all those metrics, it was fine. It played in tune. It stayed in tune. Even before I did anything to the nut, everything was perfectly fine as far as that's concerned. These are just little sort of aesthetic and sort of feel related things that I would just change as the owner of this, down the road. But I wanted to show it to you in its stock format, so you were seeing exactly the way that I saw it when I received it. If this sounds good to you, if this looks good to you, if you are inspired by the idea of getting a very high quality set neck single cut guitar with maybe some customizations, maybe a cool color, some beautiful relicing, a Bigsby or other options, you can order these from our friends over at Sweetwater, but you can also order them directly from our friends over at Heritage. And you can spec out some of these types of features and specifications to your instrument if you want to have something that is beautiful, very playable, and is a heck of a deal if you're comparing it to anything else by some of the competition. Now, again, I will take a Heritage all day long over the competitors, because I just think that it's so much better money spent. I feel like the quality is as good or better. And even on my R8, I had to take it to Joe Riggio, who's one of the foremost refinishers in the country, to get it right. So like I had to buy an R8 and then basically spend an R8 worth of money to get it to really be like a real Gibson. So thanks for checking out the video. Again, this is the Heritage Custom Core Artisan Age H150 guitar. Absolutely amazing. I'll put links to all the places where you can check them out in the description. If you have any questions about the instrument or feedback, things like that, feel free to put that in the comments. And I usually do respond to all of them, so please do that. And until next time, I'm Mason Marangella from Vertex Effects, and we'll see you.